The Council's heart world glimmered like a jewel in the dark of space, an enormous planet encircled by fleets and satellites. Here, every alien race in the galaxy had gathered to witness the authority of the Galactic Council. Generations of power, law, and order radiated from this place. Until now, no young species had dared approach it, but humanity was coming. The human fleet led by the Odyssey approached quietly, weaving through distant asteroid fields and cosmic storms. Captain Aaron Holt stood on the bridge watching the planet grow larger on the view screen. "This is it," he said softly. "The Council believes they control the galaxy. Soon they will learn that control is only an illusion." Ambassador Elena Reyes joined him, her eyes scanning the fleet. Ships from allied alien species inspired by humanity sailed alongside the human vessels. Small, medium, and experimental craft moved in unison. Humanity was no longer alone. "The galaxy is with us," she said. "Not because we demanded it, but because we showed them what freedom looks like." Holt nodded. "Then let's give them a show they'll never forget." The Council, watching from their crystalline chamber, was aware of the fleet's approach. Panic spread among the delegates. "High Speaker," Admiral Krell hissed, scales rattling. "They dare approach the heart world? This is impossible. They are still a young, primitive species." The High Speaker's voice was calm, but his eyes shimmered with worry. "Impossible does not mean unlikely. Humanity is clever. They have survived. And they are not alone. Prepare all defenses. We cannot fail." Kravax slammed his claws against the table. "Defenses alone will not stop them. This is war." The Council unleashed thousands of ships to block humanity's advance. Energy beams arced across space and defensive turrets on orbital platforms powered up. Yet every measure the Council prepared seemed insufficient. The first clash occurred above the Council's orbital stations. Human ships moved unpredictably, using tactics no alien commander had ever anticipated. Some vessels powered down engines to appear dead, then burst forward at full speed, striking weak points in Council defenses. Others used gravity wells and asteroid fragments to hide and ambush. Every Council attack was countered, every strategy foiled. The human fleet fought not with sheer power, but with cunning, courage, and unity. "Unbelievable," muttered Admiral Krell. "These humans, they fight like no species we have ever seen." "They are human," the High Speaker whispered almost to himself. "And that is enough to terrify us." On board the Odyssey, Captain Holt addressed his crew. "This is not just a fight for survival," he said. "It is a fight for the future of the galaxy. Remember what we stand for: courage, unity, and hope. The Council may have ruled for millennia, but today we remind them that no power is absolute." Lieutenant Carter added, "And every strike, every maneuver, every life we save inspires those who watch. We are not just a fleet. We are a symbol." The crew nodded, hearts steady, ready for the battle ahead. The Council unleashed its ultimate weapon, a massive energy cannon capable of vaporizing entire fleets. It fired on the Odyssey, its beam slicing through space like a blade of light. The human crew responded with precision. Using shields, decoys, and a daring maneuver through a nearby asteroid storm, they avoided destruction. Smaller human and allied ships struck the cannon's support systems, causing malfunctions. The Council's ultimate weapon, feared across the galaxy, was neutralized, not by force alone, but by ingenuity and bravery. "Impossible," Kravax hissed. "No species should survive that." "They are human," the High Speaker said, voice shaking. "That is all I need to know." As the battle raged, human diplomats in the Odyssey sent encrypted messages across the Council's networks. They revealed proof of corruption, manipulation, and oppression carried out by the Council for centuries. Data streams of evidence reached every system, every colony. Alien species watched in shock and disbelief. "You have ruled through fear and silence," Reyes broadcast. "The galaxy is awake. We fight not for conquest, but for freedom. And we are not alone." The chamber trembled as whispers of revolt spread. Council delegates argued among themselves. The galaxy, once silent under their authority, now questioned everything. Meanwhile, human and allied forces coordinated their strikes with surgical precision. Key Council outposts were disabled, supply lines disrupted, and communications hacked. Entire fleets began to falter, not just from human attacks, but because of uprisings across the galaxy. Captain Holt realized the tide had turned. The Council expected to crush us. They underestimated what hope can do. "Keep pressing. Every action counts. Every life we protect strengthens the galaxy's resolve. The crew, inspired and determined, moved in perfect synchronization. Each human pilot, engineer, and soldier knew their role. They were fighting not for glory, but for the dawn of a new era. On the Council's capital, the High Speaker finally addressed the Assembly. This human species, they are no longer a threat to be ignored. They are a force that challenges everything we know. If we continue, we risk losing control of the galaxy itself. Delegates looked at one another, fear and disbelief in their eyes. Krevax growled, but even he knew the truth. Humanity had become unstoppable, not because of weapons, but because of courage, creativity, and the unyielding desire to be free. The final confrontation occurred near the Council's central orbital station. Humans and allies formed a blockade, their ships moving with flawless coordination. Council warships fired relentlessly, yet each attack was anticipated, countered, or redirected. Humans used terrain, technology, and teamwork to their advantage. Captain Holt led a daring strike directly into the heart of the Council station, not to destroy, but to expose. He and Ambassador Reyes transmitted evidence of corruption and oppression to every system. The Council's legitimacy crumbled before their eyes. "This is not just a battle of fleets," Holt said over the comms. "It is a battle for truth, for freedom, for every being the Council has silenced, and today that battle is won." Council delegates for the first time felt powerless. Systems once loyal sent messages of support to Earth. Colonies rose in revolt. Planets declared independence. The galaxy that had once trembled under the Council's authority now celebrated the courage of humanity. Krevax hissed in frustration. "No, this cannot be." "They are only human." The High Speaker remained silent, staring at the stars. Finally he spoke, voice low but resigned. "It is enough. We are defeated not by power but by spirit, by hope, by humanity." On Earth, the news of the Council's fall spread like fire. People cheered in streets, in cities, on farms, and in space stations. Captain Holt and Ambassador Reyes returned, not as conquerors but as messengers of hope. "We did not destroy the Council," Reyes told the people. "We reminded the galaxy what courage and unity can do. We fought not for power but for freedom. And now every species has a choice, to live in fear or to live free." Children looked up at the stars and dreamed. Scientists returned to their labs, inspired to explore and innovate. Soldiers trained harder, ready to defend freedom wherever it might be threatened. Humanity had proven that even a young species could change the course of history. In the Council's former chamber, the High Speaker and remaining delegates reflected on what had happened. The galaxy had shifted forever. Power was no longer absolute. Fear was no longer universal. Humanity had shown that courage, ingenuity, and unity could topple even the oldest authority. "They are not just survivors," the High Speaker whispered. "They are leaders. They are the dawn of a new era." Across the stars, the message spread. The galaxy had a new future, one inspired by humans. No council, no matter how ancient, could ever again suppress a species that refused to be broken. And so humanity stood at the center of the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as a symbol of defiance, hope, and unyielding courage. The Council's worst nightmare had become reality. The stars were no longer the dominion of the few. They belonged to every being brave enough to reach for them. Captain Holt looked at the stars from the bridge of the Odyssey. He spoke quietly, though every crew member could hear. "The galaxy is bigger than we imagined. The fight is not over. But one thing is certain, humanity will never kneel." And the stars. The stars belong to all who dare to dream, the crew cheered. Humanity had struck back. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never forget. The galaxy was vast, older than any single species could remember. Civilizations had risen from dust, built empires that stretched across star clusters and then fallen back into silence. Planets had turned to ruins. Monuments stood abandoned, and history itself was scattered like fragments of broken glass. Yet through it all, life endured. Different races filled the stars with trade, culture, and endless arguments about power. Among them, the Zorith Alliance stood as one of the strongest unions. They were not a single species but many, bound together by treaties and shared survival. For centuries they had lived in relative peace. Trade routes were safe, colonies expanded, and technology advanced steadily. Some believed that the galaxy had entered an age where wars would become rare, where reason would guide the future. But peace, like glass, could be broken with one strike. That strike came from the dark void beyond known space. The first reports were scattered, almost dismissed. Merchant ships disappeared near the frontier. Colonies stopped sending transmissions. Patrol vessels never returned. At first, the Zorath Senate believed it was piracy, perhaps rogue fleets testing their defenses. But then survivors arrived, shaken, broken, and carrying one word on their trembling tongues: the Creel. The Creel were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced. They were not merchants, nor conquerors, nor diplomats. They were a swarm. Their ships were not built but grown, alive in terrible ways, with hulls of shifting flesh and weapons that pulsed like beating hearts. They did not negotiate. They did not leave survivors. Every world they touched was stripped, every city devoured, every voice silenced. Within months, the frontier collapsed. The Creel advanced with terrifying speed. Whole fleets of the Zorath Alliance vanished before their endless tide. The proud defenses of centuries crumbled like sandcastles before a storm. The Alliance leaders gathered, but no plan seemed strong enough. For the first time in generations, the galaxy trembled. Desperation drove them to a choice once unthinkable. They would send out a call, a broadcast, a plea for help. The signal was crafted with care. It carried in hundreds of languages, encoded with universal symbols of distress. It spoke not only to allies but to rivals, even to ancient enemies. The message was simple: we are falling. The Creel cannot be stopped. If you hear this, if you have strength, come to our aid. Without help, all will be lost. The transmission spread across the galaxy, bouncing from star to star, amplified by relay stations until it reached corners no Zorath had ever seen. To the Senate, it was both a gamble and a humiliation. To admit weakness was dangerous. But what choice did they have? Alone, they would not survive. On the homeworlds of the Alliance, fear spread like wildfire. Families gathered in silence, staring at the skies, soldiers trained with grim faces. Knowing how easily their brothers and sisters had been lost, scientists whispered of desperate weapons, of last chances, and all the while the swarm advanced. Weeks passed. Replies trickled in. Some nearby empires offered limited aid. Fleets too small, supplies too late. Others remained silent, unwilling to risk themselves. Many simply ignored the call, thinking the Zorath's fall would not reach their borders. But far away, on the edge of the galaxy, the message found ears it was never meant to reach. There, orbiting a modest yellow star, was a small world the galactic records had long dismissed. It was called Earth. The records were outdated. Long ago, explorers had passed by, noting intelligent life but seeing little worth. Humanity had no fleets, no colonies, no power to influence the stars. They were catalogued and forgotten, left to their own fate. Yet the signal reached them. When the message was decoded, humanity was not united. Earth still carried scars of conflict. Nations arguing, resources stretched, trust fragile. But the plea for help struck deep. The words of the Zorath spoke of despair, of worlds consumed, of families lost, and humanity, for all its faults, could not ignore such a cry. Debates raged across councils and governments. Some argued that Earth should stay silent, protect itself, and avoid a war that did not belong to them. Others stood and spoke of duty, of morality, of the chance to prove themselves among the stars. It was not an easy choice, but something remarkable happened. The nations of Earth, divided for so long, began to move together. Slowly, carefully but unmistakably, they decided humanity would answer. The construction yards lit up with activity. Factories that once built machines of war now crafted engines for the stars. Scientists shared their knowledge, engineers worked without rest, and pilots trained harder than ever before. Every ship that could be adapted was pressed into service. Old designs were rebuilt with new ideas. Humanity lacked the vast resources of ancient empires, but they had something else: creativity, determination, and the will to try the impossible. The fleet that rose from Earth was not grand. Compared to the armadas of the Zorath, it was small, almost fragile. The hulls were simple metal, their weapons still crude by galactic standards. But each ship carried something priceless: the courage of its crew. When the fleet prepared to depart, the world watched. Families gathered at ports and bases, waving at loved ones. Children painted stars on banners. Old veterans saluted, their eyes wet with pride. Humanity had fought many wars against itself, but this was different. This was not about land or borders or power. This was about standing against something greater than fear. The launch was slow but steady. Engines roared and ships rose into the sky, leaving trails of light. For the first time, humanity left its cradle not to explore, not to conquer, but to protect strangers across the stars. When the Zorath scouts detected the incoming fleet, they were confused. The transmissions identified the fleet as human, a name barely remembered in their archives. The Alliance leadership was stunned. How could a race so primitive answer their call when even their neighbors refused? Whispers filled the council chambers. Some called it folly. Others called it madness. But among the people, hope flickered. Perhaps even the smallest flame could push back the dark. And so the stage was set. Far across the galaxy, as the Creel swarm advanced with unstoppable hunger, a new force entered the story. Not mighty in numbers, not ancient in wisdom, but bold, defiant, and unafraid to face the impossible. The humans had heard the cry for help, and they were coming. When the human fleet left Earth's orbit, it carried more than just steel and fuel. It carried the hopes of an entire species. For the first time in history, humanity was not divided. For the first time, their mission was not for conquest, not for survival of their own kind alone, but to stand beside others who were strangers. Across the skies of Earth, people watched the last glimmers of the departing ships. Children imagined themselves as future pilots. Farmers in distant villages whispered prayers. Scientists in quiet labs followed the trajectory with tears of pride. Humanity was no longer a hidden species confined to its homeworld. Humanity was stepping onto the grand stage of the galaxy. Yet beyond the pride lay fear. The humans did not know what awaited them. They had read the words of the Zorath transmission, had seen fragments of the Creel's destruction. But imagination could only go so far. None of them had truly seen the swarm with their own eyes. None of them had stood against ships grown from flesh with weapons that pulsed like living organs. Still they flew. The Zorath Alliance had almost given up hope. Their fleets were broken, their border worlds lost. Even the strongest commanders began to whisper that surrender might be the only option, though surrender meant only death to the swarm. When the human fleet appeared on their sensors, many thought it was a mistake, a trick of faulty readings. The first transmissions from the humans were simple. They spoke of their name, of Earth, of their decision to answer the call. Their words were not polished like those of long-established empires. Their ships were not elegant, not graceful, but there was something in their tone, firm, clear, and determined, that caught attention. In the Alliance Senate, debates flared. Some dismissed the humans as fools. How could a small young race stand against the Creel when even mighty civilizations had failed? Allowing them into the war, some argued, was not bravery but cruelty, sending them to certain death. Others saw something different. The humans had come when no one else had. Their very presence was proof that courage could still exist in a galaxy drowned in fear. Perhaps their numbers were small, but perhaps their arrival was not chance. It was fate. The decision was made to allow them into Alliance space. As the human fleet entered, their captains were struck by what they saw. The once bright colonies of the Zorath were scarred and silent. Orbiting stations were half destroyed, drifting without power. Refugee vessels crowded the safer worlds, filled with families who had lost everything. The humans, hardened by centuries of their own wars, had seen ruin before. But this was different. This was the ruin of entire civilizations. Zorath civilians looked up in disbelief when the human ships passed overhead. Their hulls looked crude compared to the shining vessels of the Alliance, but they flew with discipline and order. For many who had lost hope, just seeing new ships, ships that came to help, was enough to light a spark inside their hearts. The first meeting between human commanders and the Zorath leadership was cautious. The humans wore simple uniforms, their technology unfamiliar to the older races. Their speech carried accents the translation devices struggled with. To the Zorath, they seemed rough, unpolished, and unprepared for the scale of the threat. But when the commanders spoke, their words carried weight. "We are not here for conquest," said Admiral Reyes, one of the first human leaders to speak before the Senate. "We are here because you asked for help. We are here because we know what it means to face something larger than ourselves. Humanity has been underestimated before. We have been called weak, divided, and foolish. But when the time comes, we rise, and we rise together." The chamber was silent after his speech. Some delegates scoffed quietly, whispering doubts. Others looked thoughtful, but none could deny the fire in his eyes. It did not take long for the humans to prove they were different. On the frontier, a small Creel scouting fleet was spotted moving toward a refugee convoy. The nearest Alliance defense ships were too far. In the past, such a convoy would have been lost before help arrived. The humans, however, moved without hesitation. Their fleet, though smaller and slower than most advanced armadas, cut straight across dangerous space. They pushed their engines beyond safe limits, something Alliance captains would never dare. By the time the Creel reached the convoy, the humans were already there, forming a shield of metal between the swarm and the civilians. The battle was short but fierce. The Creel were stronger, their weapons brutal, their numbers greater, but the humans fought with a style no one had seen before. They did not retreat when damaged. They adapted. They covered each other, moved in patterns that confused the swarm, and took risks no alien captain would consider. When one ship was crippled, its crew refused to abandon it until every civilian transport was safe. When the last Creel ship fell in flames, the convoy erupted with cheers. Refugees who had expected only death now lived because of these strange, determined newcomers. Word spread quickly. Humanity had arrived. Back in the Senate chambers, the story of the battle spread faster than any speech. The delegates could not ignore it. These humans, with their crude ships and reckless bravery, had achieved what larger fleets had failed to do. They had protected the weak. Soon, Zorath officers began to study the humans more closely. They noted the way human engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged vessels, never accepting failure. They observed how human pilots seemed to treat their machines not just as tools, but as extensions of themselves. They watched as human soldiers, though inexperienced compared to galactic veterans, trained with a discipline born from centuries of hardship. The aliens could not understand everything about humanity, but they understood this much. The humans did not know how to give up. Not all welcomed them, however. Among the Alliance, there were still voices of doubt. Some feared that the humans would bring more chaos than order, that their reckless courage would lead to disaster. Others whispered that perhaps the humans came not for help, but for glory, to carve out a name in galactic history. The humans, however, did not concern themselves with politics. They continued to fight where they were needed. One evening, as the human fleet rested in orbit above a scarred Zorath colony, Admiral Reyes stood with Captain Alara Chen, watching the planet turn slowly below. "Do you think they believe in us yet?" Chen asked quietly. Reyes thought for a long moment. "Belief doesn't matter," he said finally. "We didn't come here to be believed. We came here because someone needed us. If we save one life, it is worth it. If we save 1,000, even better. And if we fall..." He looked at the stars. "Then at least the galaxy will know humanity did not hide." Chen nodded. "Then let's make sure they remember." And so the humans continued their fight. Small in number, untested by galactic standards and carrying ships that seemed fragile compared to the grand fleets of the past. But they were relentless. Each victory, however small, gave hope to those who had none. The Zorath had sent a call for help. And though they never expected it, humanity had answered. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The humans had proven themselves in small battles, but the war was far from over. For every Creel ship destroyed, 100 more seemed to rise from the void. The swarm was endless, its hunger without limit. The Zorath Alliance, though grateful for the sudden spark of hope, still trembled as entire sectors fell silent. From the dark frontier came a storm. The Creel did not creep forward now, they surged. Whole fleets of living vessels spilled out of the void, descending on colonies like locusts upon a field. The skies of once thriving worlds were filled with writhing silhouettes, ships that pulsed with unnatural life. The Creel had noticed resistance. They had noticed humanity. Admiral Reyes stood on the command deck of the Resolute, Earth's flagship. Before him, a holographic display showed the spread of Creel attacks. The red markings stretched like a disease across the stars. "How many colonies have fallen this month?" he asked quietly. A Zorath officer, thin and tall with translucent skin, answered with a heavy voice. 23 confirmed. Perhaps more. Entire systems cut off. We cannot reach them." Reyes's jaw tightened. He had expected war, but not devastation on this scale. To fight against such an enemy was like standing before a tidal wave with only bare hands. Captain Chen, standing beside him, spoke what many thought but feared to say. "Admiral, we are only a drop of water in this ocean. If the Creel throw their full weight against us..." Reyes looked at the map, then at the officers from both Earth and the Zorath Alliance who were watching him. Fear was written on every face. He straightened, his voice steady. "Then we hold. Even if we are only a drop, sometimes one drop can carve stone. Humanity did not come here to run." The room was silent, but his words carried into their hearts. On the front lines, the Creel pressed harder. The humans found themselves in battles larger than anything they had imagined. Dozens of swarm ships attacked at once, weaving together like schools of monstrous fish. Each Creel vessel seemed alive, adapting mid-battle, twisting and reshaping its weapons. Their attacks came in rhythms like a heartbeat, pounding endlessly against defenses. The Zorath fleets fought bravely but struggled. Their tactics were predictable, and the swarm learned too quickly. Time and again, mighty Zorath warships were torn apart. Refugees fled in greater numbers. The humans, though smaller in number, fought differently. Where the Zorath moved like chess pieces, the humans fought like dancers on a battlefield, fast, flexible, and willing to improvise. They did not fear untested maneuvers. They did not hesitate to sacrifice a ship if it meant saving thousands. One battle above the planet Theros became legendary. The Creel descended in waves, overwhelming the defenses. The Zorath fleet was collapsing, their admiral preparing for retreat. Then the human fleet arrived. Instead of forming a single wall of defense, they split. Small strike groups darted into the swarm, weaving between larger enemy ships. They attacked weak points the Zorath had never noticed. Joints in the living hulls exposed nodes of pulsating light. When human ships were surrounded, others dived in to cover them, even if it meant taking the fire themselves. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, Theros still stood. For the first time, civilians sang the name of a new ally, humanity. But victory came at a cost. The humans lost ships. Brave crews who had left Earth never returned. Messages of loss reached back to the blue planet, where families grieved but stood taller in pride. They knew their loved ones had not died in vain. The Creel, too, were learning. They adapted faster now, changing their weapons to counter human maneuvers. What had worked once did not work twice. Humanity had entered the eye of a storm. In the Senate chambers of the Alliance, debates turned fierce. "Look at the humans," one delegate declared. "They bleed for us. They fight where our fleets falter. They show us what courage is." Another stood in anger. "Courage is nothing without strength. You praise them, yet you know they cannot win. Their fleet is small. Their technology is weak. The Creel will crush them as easily as they crush us. Shall we place our survival in the hands of children?" The chamber erupted in argument. Some demanded greater support for humanity, sharing technology and resources. Others argued the opposite, calling the humans reckless, a distraction, a candle in the wind. But in the hearts of the common people, the decision had already been made. To the refugees who had seen human ships arrive in their darkest hour, humanity was more than allies. They were saviors. Among the humans themselves, doubts also grew. On board the Resolute, crew members whispered of endless battles, of how small their fleet truly was. Some feared that Earth had thrown itself into a war it could never survive. Admiral Reyes listened to these whispers but never silenced them. He believed that fear was natural, but courage was what one chose despite fear. Late at night, as the stars glimmered outside the viewport, he would think of Earth. He thought of the families who had watched their ships rise into the sky, of the children who had painted banners. He promised himself he would not let those children's hopes burn out. The swarm did not rest. News arrived that the Creel had unleashed a force unlike any seen before. A hive ship, larger than cities, pulsing with power, directing fleets like a brain commands limbs. The very sight of it froze the blood of those who faced it. The Zorath fleets that encountered the hive ship were obliterated. Not a single vessel survived to tell the tale. Only scattered transmissions gave warning. When reports reached the humans, silence filled their command chambers. They had fought Creel before, but this was something new, something far beyond them. "Can we fight such a thing?" Captain Chen asked. Reyes answered quietly, "We must. If we do not, then no one will." As the humans prepared for what lay ahead, alliances shifted. Zorath admirals, once skeptical, began to train alongside human officers, adopting their flexible tactics. Engineers traded blueprints combining alien precision with human improvisation. Slowly, fleets learned to move together in ways unimagined before. Still, the shadow of the hive ship loomed. Every battle felt like a test before the true storm. The Creel advanced closer to the core worlds. Planets burned. Refugees crowded safe zones until they overflowed. The Senate argued endlessly, unable to find a clear path. But the people whispered a new phrase in their streets, in their homes, in the ruins of their colonies. The humans will stand. And so the humans did stand. On every battlefield they were there, small but unyielding. They turned hopeless retreats into defiance. They carved victories out of certain defeat. Their courage spread like fire, igniting the hearts of those who had almost surrendered to despair. Yet even as the galaxy found hope in them, humanity knew the truth. The greatest battle was yet to come. Far beyond the frontier, in the darkness where stars barely shone, the hive ship pulsed with life. The swarm was gathering. The galaxy held its breath, and humanity prepared to face the shadow head-on. The Creel swarm had grown stronger, faster, and more dangerous. Every day brought news of more worlds devoured, more fleets lost. Even with human assistance, the Zorath Alliance struggled to hold its borders. Panic whispered through the stars. Entire colonies prepared for evacuation as the unstoppable tide of the swarm pressed forward. Yet amidst this despair, the humans did not falter. They had learned, adapted, and grown. Every loss became a lesson. Every failure became fuel. Humanity's courage was no longer just an inspiration. It was a force in itself. Admiral Reyes paced the deck of the Resolute, reviewing the latest reports. A new Creel formation had appeared, unlike anything encountered before. Ships had hardened, their tactics evolved. Every standard attack was countered almost immediately. The hive ship pulsed in the distance, a monstrous city of living vessels coordinating the swarm with terrifying precision. "Commander Chen," Reyes said, pointing to the map, "if we continue with the same strategies, we will bleed dry. We need something new, something they cannot predict." Chen studied the display, her fingers tracing the complex web of Creel movement. "They are adapting too quickly. Anything we do, they learn within hours." "Exactly," Reyes said. "Which means we cannot fight them as they fight. We must fight differently, creatively, unexpectedly." The room was quiet, officers weighing the impossibility of the task, but the humans had learned to thrive in impossibility. The first attempt at a new strategy came at the world of Lurath. The planet's orbit was a desperate refuge for civilian fleets. The Creel approached in a wave larger than any seen before. Previous battles would have ended in destruction. But the humans acted differently. Rather than forming a single front, the human fleet split into dozens of small strike groups. Each group carried not just weapons but ingenuity. Engineers had rigged asteroid fragments with energy cores, turning them into moving traps. Ships carried modified energy pulses, designed to temporarily disrupt the swarm's coordination. Pilots worked together in patterns that resembled a dance, weaving between enemy vessels in ways the Creel could not anticipate. The Zorath were skeptical at first. "This is madness," one officer whispered. "They are scattering their forces into certain death." But as the humans engaged, the results became clear. The Creel stumbled. Ships crashed into one another. The swarm's rhythm faltered. Where Zorath forces had failed before, humanity succeeded. Civilians were evacuated without loss. The Creel were not destroyed, but the tide was slowed, broken, and scattered. It was the first real victory against the swarm in months. Inspired by the success, other species began to adopt human tactics. Zorath admirals held emergency training sessions, learning from human pilots how to think in motion, how to improvise, and how to use creativity as a weapon. Engineers from multiple worlds collaborated with human crews, modifying weapons and ships in ways previously considered impossible. Even the smallest humans showed remarkable skill. Young cadets who had never left Earth before piloted strike craft with precision and courage that astonished alien officers. Mechanics repaired damaged vessels mid-battle, improvising solutions from scrap parts while medics worked tirelessly to save injured crews. Humanity's ingenuity was spreading and the galaxy was beginning to change, but the Creel were relentless. As the humans adapted, the swarm learned. New wave patterns emerged, faster, more coordinated. The hive ship pulsed like a beating heart, commanding fleets with terrifying intelligence. One small miscalculation could wipe out entire strike teams. Human fleets began to suffer casualties, and even the bravest crews felt the weight of impossible odds. Late one night, aboard the Resolute, Admiral Reyes met with his senior officers. A map of the swarm flickered before them, showing hundreds of ships converging on the core sector of the galaxy. "We cannot fight them head-on," he said. "Not now, not like this. Every direct assault costs us too much. We need a different approach." A young engineer, her face tired but determined, raised her hand. "What if we strike at the hive ship itself?" A silence fell. Every officer looked at her in disbelief. "The hive ship?" Chen repeated. "Do you realize the scale? It is larger than any fleet we've ever faced. Destroying it would be impossible." The engineer shook her head. "Not impossible. We just need a new way to fight. If we can disrupt its command, the swarm loses coordination. Its fleet will falter, giving us an advantage." Reyes nodded slowly, feeling the spark of hope ignite once again. "Then we plan for the heart. Humanity strikes at the core. We will find a way." The following weeks were a blur of preparation. Human engineers worked alongside Zorath scientists, building specialized weapons designed to penetrate the hive ship's defenses. Pilots trained tirelessly, practicing coordinated maneuvers that would carry them straight into the swarm's center. Every ship, no matter how small, had a purpose. Every crew member knew the risk, yet none hesitated. Even as the humans prepared, other species began to join them more willingly. The courage and ingenuity of humanity inspired hope, even in the most war-weary aliens. For the first time, the galaxy began to fight not as separate empires, but as a united force, guided by humans' example. When the humans first approached the edge of the swarm, the scale of the enemy became real. Thousands of Creel ships stretched across space, moving with terrifying precision. The hive ship loomed at the center, larger than any station or planet, pulsating with living energy. Its surface shimmered and shifted, impossible to comprehend. Admiral Reyes watched from the bridge of the Resolute, his hands gripping the rail. "We will not run," he said quietly. "We fight, we adapt, and we do the impossible. Humanity does not yield, and we will not start now." Captain Chen added, "Every move we make now will decide the fate of millions. But I have faith in our crews, in our fleet, and in the people who sent us here. We are ready." The fleet moved forward. The first engagements were brutal. Small human strike teams dove into the swarm, weaving between Creel ships and striking at weak points. Asteroids rigged with energy cores detonated inside the swarm, collapsing entire waves of enemy vessels. Human pilots performed daring maneuvers that confounded even the oldest Zorath admirals. For the first time, the swarm faltered. Confused by the unorthodox attacks, their formations broke. The hive ship pulsed furiously, trying to regain control, but human ingenuity continued to disrupt its coordination. Every human ship lost in these assaults was mourned, yet their sacrifice was not wasted. They bought time for civilians to escape. They carved openings for larger fleets to follow. Each act of bravery turned despair into hope. By the end of the campaign, the humans had done something no one thought possible. They had proven that the Creel could be challenged. Not fully defeated, not yet, but slowed, disrupted, and weakened. Where once the galaxy had seen only endless horror, it now saw defiance. Admiral Reyes addressed the fleet in orbit above a liberated system. "Look at what you have done," he said, his voice calm but filled with pride. "You have faced an enemy no one thought could be stopped. You have adapted where others failed. You have inspired hope where there was none. Humanity is not just a species, it is an idea. Courage, ingenuity, defiance in the face of impossible odds. And today we turn the tide. Across the galaxy, hope spread like wildfire. Refugees who had feared the end began to rebuild. Zorath fleets regained strength, inspired by humans' daring. Even species who had doubted Earth now looked upon humanity with awe and respect. Yet the humans knew the battle was not over. The hive ship still lived, still pulsed, still commanded the swarm. The galaxy's core was under threat, and the final confrontation loomed. But for the first time, humanity believed in themselves. And that belief, that unshakable determination, was a weapon far more dangerous than any missile or laser. The turning point had come. Humanity had proven that even in the shadow of an endless swarm, courage, unity, and creativity could make the impossible possible. And now, The galaxy waited for the moment when the humans would strike at the very heart of the Creel.